Good morning. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. We're broadcasting live from the studios of Jack Diggs Productions here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Now, usually right about this time, I'd be, teasing a segment on a local bakery or a tech startup here in the county. We actually had the run of show taped to the desk right here. We were going to talk about the new mural project downtown, but about 2 hours ago, we literally ripped that sheet up. The monitors here in the studio, and frankly, the monitors in every newsroom from London to Tokyo, they all switch to the same image.
Yeah, it's one of those mornings where the coffee goes cold on the desk because you forget to drink it. The wire started flashing around 6 p.m. Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. has died at age 84. And, even though we knew he'd been battling Parkinson's for years and we knew things had taken a turn late last year, the finality of it really sucks the air out of the room.
It does. It really does. It feels like a tectonic plate has shifted. So, for the listeners tuning in, expecting our scheduled spotlight on local business owners as part of our Black Excellence Month, we are going to get back to that, I promise. We will resume our Rutherford County programming tomorrow, Wednesday, February 18th. But today, we are dedicating this entire deep dive to understanding a life that quite literally changed the context in which we all live.
It's impossible to overstate his stature. I mean, it really is. If you just look at the tributes pouring in from every corner of the globe this morning, you see this multifaceted identity. He wasn't just one thing. He was a civil rights leader. Yes, of course. He was a global humanitarian. He was a presidential trailblazer. He was a diplomat without a portfolio.
And the founder of institutions that they became household names. Operation PUSH and the Rainbow Coalition.
Right. And through all of it, there was this core message. If you had to boil down 84 years of struggle and controversy and triumph into 3 words, the theme for today's deep dive is undeniable.
Keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive.
Yeah. It's a phrase that became a catchphrase, right? Maybe even a cliche to some who didn't know the history, or perhaps a punchline on late-night TV at times. But when you unpack it, and we are absolutely going to unpack it today, it wasn't just a slogan, it was. It was a survival strategy.
It was a political philosophy.
Yeah.
A theological stance, even.
So here's our mission for the next hour. We want to understand how one man's voice shaped generations. And I want to be clear, while we usually focus on our local community, this story is the backdrop for everything we see locally. You don't have the local victories here in Murfreesboro without the national doors that Jesse Jackson kicked open.
That's the so what for today. That's exactly it. We aren't just recounting a biography. We're looking at how the world was reshaped by this one individual's refusal, his absolute refusal to accept the status quo.
So let's go back, way back, to the beginning. Because to understand the man who ran for president in the 80s, you have to understand the boy who couldn't even sit at a lunch counter in the 40s.
The origin story. It all starts there.
Jesse Lewis Jackson was born on October 8th, 1941, Greenville, South Carolina. Now, help us set the stage here. 1941 in South Carolina. This isn't just the past. This is a completely different world.
It's a different planet almost. To understand Jackson, you have to understand Greenville, South Carolina in 1941. It was known as the textile capital of the world, but it was strictly, and I mean strictly, bifurcated. Jackson grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, literally. The train tracks divided the black and white communities. He wrote later in his life about looking at those massive textile mills and seeing that the only black people allowed inside were pushing brooms. That's it. They weren't allowed to touch the machines. They couldn't be weavers or foremen.
So it's a world that's defined by limitation from the moment you're born.
Exactly. Legal, social, physical limitation. Jim Crow wasn't just about separate water fountains, that's the simplistic version. It was a psychological system designed to crush ambition. It was a system designed to tell a black child, you can go this high and absolutely no higher.
And for Jackson, it was even more personal than that, wasn't it? It wasn't just the systemic stuff.
That's right. And this is so crucial to understanding his drive. It wasn't just economic barriers, it was psychological. Jackson was born to a teenage mother, Helen Burns. His biological father was a neighbor, a married man named Noah Robinson. And Robinson was a relatively successful, well-known figure in the community. So Jackson had to grow up seeing his biological father in town and essentially being treated like a stranger.
Wow. That has to leave a mark.
A massive mark. You think about that chip on his shoulder, that famous ambition. It started right there. It's the illegitimacy stigma. He was taunted by other kids. They chant things at him. He had this burning, all-consuming need to prove he was somebody long before he coined that famous phrase, I am somebody. He was fighting for recognition in his own backyard before he ever thought about fighting for it in the White House.
And yet, everything we read about his early years suggests he didn't let that define him in a negative way. He used it as fuel.
That's what's so fascinating about his youth. There was this early, almost preternatural clarity of purpose. You often hear about leaders finding their voice later in life, but Jackson's seemed to understand the injustice of his environment, and more importantly, the power of his own voice from a very young age.
He was an athlete, right? A quarterback.
A star quarterback,
Right.
which is a leadership role in itself. You're the one calling the plays, you're the one commanding the huddle. He was a natural at it. And that athleticism was his ticket out, or so he thought.
Right. He started his college journey at the University of Illinois. He got out of the South.
He did. He went north on a football scholarship. And this is such a pivotal moment that people often skip over. He thinks he's escaping Jim Crow, he's going to the Big Ten, it's a whole new world. But he finds that even up north, the racial dynamics are, well, let's just call them cold.
Cold in what way?
Well, he was a quarterback,
Yeah.
a star high school quarterback. He gets to the University of Illinois ready to compete, and he's told point blank he cannot play that position.
Why? Because they already had a starter. Was it a talent thing?
No, not at all. It was because of his race. The coaching staff and the unspoken culture of big-time college football at the time operated under the racist assumption that black players didn't have the intellectual capacity to lead the team. They could run the ball, they could catch the ball, but they couldn't call the plays. They couldn't be the field general.
That is just, it's infuriating to even hear now.
Imagine living it. It was profoundly insulting. And for someone like Jackson, who knew he was smarter than half the people in the room, it was intolerable. So what does he do? He doesn't just accept being moved to wide receiver. He transfers. He goes back south to North Carolina A&T, a historically black university in Greensboro.
And that decision puts him right in the heat of the fire.
Exactly. Greensboro in the early 60s. This is ground zero for the sit-in movement that started in 1960.
Yeah.
This is where the student-led civil rights movement is absolutely exploding. Jackson steps into this environment not just as a student and an athlete, but as a student leader. He becomes class president. He starts organizing protests. He's a rising force in the Southern freedom struggle almost immediately.
It's like he was a magnet. He had this energy that just pulled people toward him. And eventually, that energy pulled him into the orbit of the biggest star in the galaxy at that time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
By the early 1960s, that connection was inevitable. It was bound to happen. You have the established leader of the movement, Dr. King, and then you have this young, brash, incredibly talented, and let's be honest, incredibly ambitious organizer in Jackson. And it wasn't just a distant admiration.
Let's really unpack that dynamic, because I think in popular history, people sometimes glaze over the nuance of the relationship. They think, oh, they were on the same team. And they were, but it was more complex than that, wasn't it? It wasn't just a simple father-son dynamic.
No, not at all. It was a partnership of purpose, but it was also a mentorship that was, fraught with the tension of generational shifts. Jackson joined the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was King's organization. And he didn't just join, he quickly became lieutenant. But you have to remember, King was surrounded by his peers, men like Ralph Abernathy and Andrew Young, who were his age, his contemporaries. Jackson was the kid.
The ambitious kid, the one who was maybe moving a little too fast for them sometimes.
The ambitious, impatient kid, yes. He worked alongside King. They marched together in Selma. They strategized together in Chicago. But Jackson had a specific mandate that really set him apart and let him build his own power base within the movement.
And that was Operation Breadbasket.
Operation Breadbasket.
Okay, for our listeners who might not know, break down what Operation Breadbasket actually was. Because the name, it sounds a little, well, it sounds like a food drive. It sounds like charity. But it was so much more aggressive than that.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. It wasn't charity. It was economic warfare, in a sense. This is a critical distinction. Dr. King and the SCLC understood that you could integrate a lunch counter, but if black people didn't have the money to buy the burger, what was the point of the victory? So Operation Breadbasket was the economic justice arm of the movement.
So what were the tactics? How did they actually go about forcing these big companies to change?
This wasn't just Jackson shouting through a megaphone, though he was good at that too. Operation Breadbasket was actually a pretty sophisticated data operation.
Yeah.
Jackson and his team would go into a black neighborhood in a city like Chicago and do what they called a market basket survey. They would physically go into the stores and count how much Wonder Bread is on the shelves, how much Coca-Cola, how many cartons of milk from a specific dairy.
So they were doing the inventory math. They were calculating market share.
Exactly. They were turning consumption into a weapon. Then they would go to the corporate HQ, let's say a grocery chain or a soda distributor, with their data. And they'd say, Our community consumes 30% of your product in the city of Chicago. You make millions of dollars from us, but you have 0 black truck drivers, 0 black managers, and you don't advertise on our radio stations or use black-owned banks.
That is such a powerful lever to pull.
It's leverage,
Yeah.
pure and simple. Jackson would present them with a choice. He'd say, you can sign this covenant,
A literal contract.
a literal contract,
Right.
promising X number of jobs by Y date, promising to bank with these black-owned institutions, or we will launch a total boycott of your products, and we will have ministers preach against you from the pulpit every Sunday.
Wow. And the covenant is the key word there. It has this religious weight, but it was a binding business agreement. He was essentially pioneering the concept of modern corporate social responsibility, but he was doing it with a hammer, not a polite handshake.
That's a perfect way to put it. And he was incredibly successful at it. He really was. They secured thousands of jobs. They forced millions of dollars in capital into black banks and other businesses. This was real, tangible economic impact.
And this is where we see that relentless energy that King valued so much in him.
King definitely saw something special in Jackson. He saw a young man who could move a crowd from despair to determination in 10 minutes flat. He had that charisma. There was a bond there, a deeply personal trust. King mentored him, he challenged him, and sometimes he probably felt a bit exhausted by him because Jackson was always pushing, always moving, always thinking about the next campaign. There are stories of King just wanting a moment of quiet reflection, and Jackson's in the corner pitching the next strategy, the next march, the next target for breadbasket.
It's that drive, that inability to sit still when there is so much work to be done. But that work and that relationship, it all brings us to the turning point, the moment that changed everything for him, for the movement, for the country.
April 4th, 1968.
Memphis, Tennessee, the Lorraine Motel.
And we're broadcasting from Tennessee today, and it's heavy to think about the proximity of that history. It's just down the road from us.
I think we often forget the specific reason King was in Memphis. Let's remind everyone, it wasn't a random stop on a tour.
No, it was fundamental to his mission at that point. He was there for the sanitation workers. It goes right back to economic justice. Black sanitation workers in Memphis were being crushed by dangerous working conditions and poverty-level pay. Just a couple months earlier, 2 workers, Echo Cole and Robert Walker, had been crushed to death in the compactor of a faulty garbage truck. King came to support their strike. He came to give it a national spotlight. And Jesse Jackson was part of that inner circle present in those final fateful hours.
So let's walk through that evening, because Jackson wasn't just in town. He was right there, in the middle of it all.
He was in the courtyard of the motel. It was the evening of April 4th. King was up on the balcony of room 306, outside his room. They were getting ready to go to dinner at the home of a local minister, Reverend Samuel Kiles. And from all accounts, there was some lighthearted banter, a moment of ease. King was leaning over the railing talking to a musician named Ben Branch, who was in the courtyard below, and King asked him to play his favorite hymn, Precious Lord, Take My Hand, at the rally that night.
And Jackson was down below with Branch.
Jackson was down below in the parking lot area. They were joking around. The mood was, light, despite the heavy threats that are always hanging over them. And then at 6:01 p.m., a single shot.
A single rifle shot from across the street.
And the world just shattered. Everything stopped. Jackson, Andrew Young, and others. They all ran towards the sound. They ran up the stairs. Jackson was one of the first people to reach the balcony.
So he saw it all.
He saw the devastation. He saw the bleeding. He saw the chaos. He saw his leader, his mentor, mortally wounded. He witnessed the end of an era in real time. And I want us to just pause and think about the psychological impact of that. He was 26 years old.
26. I mean, just try to imagine that. You're 26 years old and you're holding your mentor, who is the symbol of hope for millions of people, as he dies on a motel balcony.
The trauma of that moment marked him forever. I mean, how could it not? But the next 24 hours for Jackson are where the history gets complicated.
Well, it gets complicated, and it's a source of controversy that followed him for decades.
You're talking about the shirt, the bloodstained shirt.
I am. And we have to address this because it is a fundamental part of his story and the story of the movement's splintering. The next day, Jackson appears on the Today Show in Chicago. He's wearing a turtleneck, and it's visibly stained with what he says is Dr. King's blood. He tells the world, and he tells Mayor Daley of Chicago, that he held Dr. King in his arms as he died, that he was the last person he spoke to. Now, historically, there's been a lot of friction there. Right, because others who were there disputed that account.
They did. Others in King's inner circle, like Ralph Abernathy and Andrew Young, their accounts differ. They've said that Jackson's story was an exaggeration. They felt he was trying to elevate his own role in the narrative, to position himself as the heir apparent.
It was sort of the first major crack in the movement's unity after King's death. Some saw it as a young man processing immense grief. Others saw it as opportunism, a power play.
And I think looking back, we have to hold both of those truths. It was a moment of supreme, unimaginable trauma. But it was also the moment that Jackson, perhaps more clearly than anyone, realized the movement now had a massive power vacuum at its center. Whether he seized that moment or inherited it is a debate that split the civil rights community for a decade. But there was no denying that wearing that shirt to the media was a conscious, deeply symbolic act. He was telling America, and maybe telling himself, the blood is on us, but the work is now on me.
He wasn't just a witness anymore. He was stepping up to be a torchbearer.
That's exactly it. And that transition propels us into the next phase of his life. Because the movement didn't die with Dr. King. It couldn't. It had to evolve. And Jesse Jackson was, without a doubt, one of the primary architects of that evolution.
This leads us to 1971. He formally breaks with the SCLC, which was Abernathy's organization now, and he founds Operation PUSH.
People United to Save Humanity. Though everyone just called it PUSH.
It's such a powerful acronym, and again, for everyone listening, we say push, the word. It implies action. It implies force. It's not a passive name.
It's not. And the mission was a direct continuation and an expansion of Operation Breadbasket. It was about economic empowerment, educational opportunity, and crucially, political participation. Jackson viewed himself as the one who had to keep the pressure on corporate America, on the government. He moved his base of operations to Chicago, and that became his headquarters for the rest of his life.
And for a decade, PUSH was the engine. They were doing the work, the boycotts, the voter registration drives. But then in the 80s, he takes another massive, audacious step. And this is where I think the political landscape of this country really begins to shift beneath our feet. 1984, he announces the Rainbow Coalition.
This is, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant and influential political concepts of the 20th century. The Rainbow Coalition. It changed everything.
What was the core idea here? Because rainbow sounds nice, it sounds pretty, but it was actually a very gritty, very strategic political alliance.
It was pure genius. Jackson had this unique insight. He understood that if you looked at the demographics of America, all the so-called minorities, if you added them all up, they were actually a massive, potentially powerful block of people, a majority of the Diedos ignored. He realized that the fight for justice wasn't just a black and white issue.
Right, it was bigger than that.
So he built a coalition. He reached out to black voters, of course, but also to white factory workers who were losing their jobs to automation in the Rust Belt. He reached out to Latino farm workers in the West, to Asian Americans fighting discrimination, to Native Americans fighting for their sovereignty, to poor Appalachian families, and very importantly, to the LGBTQ community, which, you have to remember, in the early 80s, during the AIDS crisis, was not being embraced by mainstream politics at all. It was a radical act of inclusion.
He brought the margins to the center of the political stage.
He did. He stood in front of them and he told them, you might be different colors, you might pray to different gods, you might love differently, but your struggle is the same. Your opposition is the same. The common ground was economic disenfranchisement. It wasn't just a symbolic holding of hands, it was strategic. It changed the Democratic Party forever. It changed the political imagination of America by proving you could unite people through shared struggle, not just shared identity.
And he took that coalition and did something that, at the time, many people, black and white, said was impossible. He ran for president of the United States.
Twice, 1984 and 1988.
Let's really talk about those runs. Because sitting here in 2026, we've seen a black president, we've seen a black female vice president. It feels normal now, in a way. But in 1984, what did that look like?
In 1984, it was revolutionary. It was practically science fiction to the political establishment. And you're right, even some established black leaders thought it was a bad idea, that it would split the Democratic vote and help Reagan. But Jackson became the most successful black presidential candidate in history up to that time. And he didn't just run to make a point. He ran to win.
Let's dig into that 1984 run first, because looking back, the establishment media and the Democratic Party treated it as like a vanity project or a protest campaign. Walter Mondale was the inevitable nominee. But Jackson understood something about the math of the Democratic Party that they didn't.
He realized the math was rigged against outsiders, and he decided to break it. At the time, many states had these winner-take-all thresholds or bonus delegates for the winner, systems designed to create a quick consensus around an establishment candidate. Jackson mobilized millions of new voters, people who had never touched a ballot box in their lives. He got them registered. But here's the kicker. Despite winning nearly 20% of the popular vote in the primaries that year, he got a tiny fraction of the delegates.
Because the party rules were explicitly designed to filter out insurgents like him.
Precisely. But Jackson didn't just get mad and go home. He went to the Democratic National Convention in San Francisco, and he leveraged his delegates to force a debate to change the rules for the future. If you look at how the Democratic Party awards delegates proportionally today, the very system that actually allowed Barack Obama to mount a successful challenge and defeat Hillary Clinton in 2008, that system exists because Jesse Jackson demanded it in 1984 and, again, more successfully, in 1988.
So he lost the battle for the nomination, but he won the war for the future of the party.
He rewrote the rule book. He made the party more democratic, literally.
And what was the visual shift like? I mean, just for the average person turning on the TV at night.
It was profound, absolutely profound. For the first time in American history, you saw a black man on a national debate stage, not asking for permission, not as a token, but speaking with absolute clarity, conviction, and command. He was debating foreign policy with Gary Hart. He was debating agricultural policy with Walter Mondale. He was commanding the room, and he was often the most eloquent person on that stage.
And his message, the slogan that defined it all, keep hope alive.
That was the slogan. But it was more than that. It was a call to action. It energized young voters. It expanded who participated in democracy. There are people voting today or whose parents started voting because Jesse Jackson looked them in the eye through their television screen and asked them to in 1984.
Then he runs again in '88, and he does even better.
Much better. In 1988, he was a truly serious contender. He won 11 primaries and caucuses. He won states like Michigan and Virginia. He got 7 million votes. For a while there, the spring of '88, it looked like he might actually have a path to the nomination. He finished second to Michael Dukakis.
And we have to make the connection here. We have to draw the straight line from those campaigns to the future.
You cannot tell the story of Barack Obama without first telling the story of Jesse Jackson. It's impossible.
Explicitly.
Explicitly. Jackson plowed the ground. He took the arrows. He endured the racist caricatures and the intense scrutiny. He normalized the very idea of a black commander-in-chief for millions of Americans. He didn't win the presidency himself, but he absolutely changed the presidency. He expanded the realm of what was considered possible. When Barack Obama won in 2008, you saw that famous footage of Jesse Jackson in the crowd at Grant Park in Chicago with tears just streaming down his face. He knew what it took to get to that moment.
It's an incredible arc to think about, from that balcony in Memphis in '68 to Grant Park in Chicago in '08.
It is the arc of the moral universe bending toward justice, and he was one of the people pulling on that arc with all his might.
But Jackson wasn't content with just domestic politics. That wasn't the only arena he played in. He had this whole other life as a global statesman.
He did. He was a diplomat without a portfolio, a maverick. He often frustrated the State Department, but he got results.
I remember reading about these hostage negotiations. This wasn't standard by-the-book diplomacy where you send a carefully worded memo.
No, this was what some called cowboy diplomacy, but in the best sense of the word. This is where he was really unique. He would just go. In 1984, a U.S. Navy pilot, Lieutenant Robert Goodman, was shot down over Lebanon and captured by Syria. The Reagan administration couldn't get him out. All the official channels failed. Jesse Jackson, a private citizen, flies to Damascus, sits down with the Syrian president, Hafez al-Assad, appeals to him as a religious leader and a humanitarian, and brings the pilot home.
That is just incredible. It sounds like something out of a movie.
It really does. He went to Cuba and got political prisoners released. He went to Iraq before the Gulf War to bring home foreign nationals who were being held as human shields by Saddam Hussein. He went to Yugoslavia during the Kosovo War. And he would sit down with dictators and leaders that the U.S. government officially wouldn't talk to, and he would say, I'm not here for the government. I'm here for the families. I'm here as a man of God to bring these people home.
And it worked. Time and time again.
It worked. He secured the release of hostages when official channels had completely failed. He was a bridge builder on a global scale. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Clinton for a reason. He understood that humanitarianism transcends borders and politics.
It's a staggering resume, a truly staggering life. But even giants are human. And in recent years, we saw the physical toll that age and illness take on everyone.
We did. In 2017, he announced his diagnosis with Parkinson's disease. And for a man whose primary tool was his voice, whose instrument was his powerful physical presence and his energy, that was a particularly cruel and difficult battle.
But he kept showing up, even when it was hard.
He did. Even when he was physically shaking, his resolve was steady. You would see him at rallies, sometimes in a wheelchair, sometimes needing assistance to stand at the podium. But the mind was still sharp. The fire was still in his eyes. The commitment was still there.
But in late 2025, we heard he faced additional neurological complications. And then the timeline brings us to today, Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. He passed away this morning.
The family released a statement just a little while ago describing him as a servant leader who lived his entire life for the oppressed and the voiceless.
And I think that's the perfect epitaph, a servant leader.
It is. It truly is.
So let's bring it home. What does this all mean? Here we are in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We're a local show. We care about what happens on the town square, what happens in our schools, what happens on our streets. Why does the passing of Jesse Jackson in Chicago matter to a listener driving down Medical Center Parkway right now?
It matters because his legacy isn't abstract. It isn't just something that happened in Washington or Selma or Chicago. It is woven into the local DNA of this community and every community in America.
Let's make those specific parallels, because we've been celebrating Black excellence here in Rutherford County all month.
Okay, let's do it. Think about the economic justice aspect of Operation PUS. When we highlight Black-owned businesses in Murfreesboro that are fighting for visibility, that are fighting for city contracts, that are trying to build generational wealth, that is the direct continuation of the work Jackson started with, Operation Breadbasket. The very idea that a corporation has a social and economic responsibility to the community it serves, that's a PUSH concept.
It's the same fight, just on a local scale.
It's the exact same fight. Now think about the coalition building, the Rainbow Coalition concept. Look at our schools. Look at the multiracial, multi-ethnic solidarity we see in civic spaces and community groups here in Rutherford County. That idea that we are stronger together across lines of race and class and background, that is Jackson's legacy living and breathing in our own neighborhoods.
And the political imagination piece.
Absolutely. That might be the most important part. When we see young leaders in Rutherford County, Black, white, Latino, Asian, running for school board, running for city council, believing that they belong in those decision-making rooms, they are standing on the platform that Jesse Jackson built. They don't have to fight the battle to prove they have the intellectual capacity to be there because Jackson already fought and won that battle on the national stage.
It's the long arc that we always talk about.
It is. The teachers, the coaches, the mentors, the small business owners, the artists that we've been highlighting all month, they are the living continuation of the movement. They are the proof that hope was kept alive.
That is a beautiful way to put it. They are the proof.
They are.
So, today we pause. We reflect. We recognize that our local stories are just chapters in the same long book as Jesse Jackson's national story.
And it is a book that is still being written. The work continues.
It is. And that brings us to our final thought for today, that message, keep hope alive. It's not just a passive slogan. It's a command. It's an instruction for the future.
It's an active verb. I think that's the key. Keeping hope alive is work. It's not a feeling, it's an action. It requires effort, it requires resilience, it requires looking at the world as it is and steadfastly refusing to accept that it cannot be better. And I think the best way any of us can honor Reverend Jackson today is to do that work, to look at our own community, see where the gaps are, see where the injustice is, and step into that gap.
Well said. Very well said.
Thank you.
We are going to wrap up this special edition of The Deep Dive. We want to thank you for joining us for this moment of remembrance and reflection. If you want to connect with us to follow our ongoing mission of documenting and uplifting these stories, both local and national, you can always find us at Jack Biggs Productions online.
We're here. We are listening.
And just a reminder for everyone, tomorrow, Wednesday, February 18th, we will be back to our regularly scheduled program. We will be returning to our Black History Month spotlight on the local Black excellence right here in Rutherford County. And we have some amazing stories lined up to tell you tomorrow.
You really won't want to miss it.
But for today, we leave you with the memory of a giant. We honor Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, Sr. We honor his life. We honor his legacy. And as he taught us, taught the whole world, no matter how dark the night, no matter how steep the climb.
Keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive. Good day, everyone.